I was having your boy Rico from RicoScores, and man, still on vacation, but the movement does not stop. And actually, there's so much going on in Commanders land right now. I may go ahead and try to knock out a second video today, 2 videos in one day. I know a lot of y'all are saying just enjoy vacation, but man, the Commanders have so much going on, and I'm just so excited to even read about these things or listen to it, watch it. I just feel like I gotta report it, man, because a lot of y'all may be missing out on a lot of the random things that are going on in Commanders land right now. But most importantly, for this video specifically, Benkert said that Washington Commanders will be the next Texans-like Super Bowl contender. He bookmarked it. We're going to read his and break down his entire tweet. Also, Skip Bayless even said that he's afraid of what the Commanders have going on, especially after free agency. But most importantly, the majority of this video is going to be a deep dive into whether or not the Commanders should go and trade for 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk. Of course, there's the strong connection to Adam Peters, our now general manager, the assistant general manager for the 49ers the past few years. So that makes it more likely, but we got to dive into whether it makes sense for us. How good of a receiver is he actually? We're going to take a look at stats, Pro Football Focus grades, how much money he may potentially ask for. We're going to look at his contract situation, 5th-year options, all of that. And of course, we got to compare it to the Stephon Diggs trade that happened today, where he got traded from the Bills to the Texans. So we're going to do all of that and more. But before we do, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Again, I know I'm on vacation, but I just can't help myself. I gotta bring y'all the up-to-date Commanders news. I'm still working on that cap space update. I will more than likely just end up doing that when I get back from vacation. I'm working on film sessions for the draft prospects. I can't even do that without my entire setup where I'm literally watching the play the same time as y'all on my PC and everything. Right now, I'm recording these videos off of my iPhone, so I gotta wait till I get back home for that as well. But just make sure y'all stay tuned, stay patient with me. Let's go ahead and get to this video right now, man. Let's get it. Adam. All right, so let's go ahead and start this video off with the fact that the Commanders got a big time endorsement from 2 national media analysts that are not Commanders fans at all. Of course, we all know Skip Bayless, but even Benkert, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, he tweeted out the Texans flipped the division upside down. Rookie head coach last year, killed the draft rookie quarterback and added pieces, then reloaded in an off season of year 2. Want to know my prediction for the next team to do this? At the Commanders. He notes the 49ers pipeline GM, head coach on first-year contract, likely to take star quarterback in the draft as well, already has pieces at wide receiver and defensive-minded head coach like the Texans. We'll be saving this tweet for when the Commanders flip the NFC East upside down in a few years. So he is noting that this may not happen immediately, and according to the Texans timeline, that would be we would technically win the division in this 2024 season, but we won't be considered real Super Bowl contenders like the Texans are now, especially after trading for Stephon Diggs in most people's eyes, until 2025. But either way, this is again a national analyst. In his picture, he has a Green Bay Packers jersey on. I'm not exactly sure which team he's a fan of, but I know it's not the Commanders. Even the diction in his tweet, even the way that he words it, it just sounds like a guy from the outside talking about us. And he's saying that, hey man, believe me now or believe me later. But even as a non-Commanders fan, he's betting on the Commanders to be the next team to do something like the Texans did, which was go from one of the worst teams in the NFL to one of the best within just a couple of off seasons. And so, hey man, I'm right with them. I've at least been saying that I hope the Commanders can pull the Texans and go from number 2 overall pick to winning the division, and then maybe the next offseason we can turn it all the way around, and then we can be Super Bowl contenders like the Texans are right now. I'm hoping. But of course, hitting on quarterback matters a lot. I feel like we did a lot of great things in the front office. I feel like we've done a lot of coaching hires, all following the Texans blueprint, and I've also feel like that we've had some pretty good free agency moves as well. You got to get that quarterback right, though, to follow this blueprint. But either way, moving on, then you also have Skip Bayless clear diehard Cowboys fan, national media analyst, not a Commanders fan at all. He tweeted out back on March 13th, it looks like Dan Quinn's Commanders are trying to retool the NFL's worst defense on the fly through free agency, then spend whatever draft capital is required to land Caleb Williams. The goal, win now. They're starting to scare me. So that's another pretty big endorsement for the Commanders. And I feel like with the way that Adam Peters is building this team right now, and Skip Bayless should be afraid of the Commanders, whether we take Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, or Drake May, in my opinion. So watch out, Skip. Even if we don't do whatever it takes to get Caleb Williams, trade up to number 1 overall or whatever, which is looking, of course, very unlikely. I highly doubt we end up with Caleb Williams. I feel like Skip Bayless should be just as afraid if we get Jayden Daniels or Drake May, because I feel like either of those guys can end up balling out for us with the coaching staff that we have here, the culture that we're building, the moves that we made in free agency, setting up to basically just, you put that quarterback on this team and it's great. I've already said in a previous video, I feel like top 2 pick wise, like quarterback landing spots, typically the number 1 overall pick landing spot for a quarterback, and the same thing with the 2nd overall pick, are usually terrible teams, like absolutely awful, to the point that a quarterback may even think about, man, going 1 overall is nice, but to go to a team with that terrible of a setup for me to just get dropped into, I don't know about that. But the Bears did everything they could in free agency the past couple of years to make their team basically a Caleb Williams away from being truly competitive. And then I feel like the Commanders, what we've done this offseason alone, I'm not saying that we're Super Bowl contenders at all, but I feel like whoever we end up drafting, Jayden Daniels or Caleb Williams, will not just be plopped onto a typical number 2 overall draft pick roster. I don't feel like our roster is anywhere near as bad as a team normally picking at number 2 overall usually is. I don't feel like it at all. I feel like this is arguably 2 of the best teams to ever, roster-wise on paper, to be picking in the top 2 of a draft ever. But of course, the Chicago Bears, they didn't earn that number 1 overall pick. They got that from the Panthers, who were absolutely terrible. And then we just did a great job of retooling this entire team in just one offseason, which is very similar to what the Texans did last year. They went from number 2 overall pick, and before they even selected CJ Stroud 2nd overall, their team was already pretty good. And then after they took them, and then they had a really good draft after that as well, they got true playmakers like Will Anderson and things like that. Then they developed guys like Tank Dell and all of those guys. I just feel like we could do something very similar to that. I feel like by the time we're actually picking our quarterback number 2 overall, we are not anywhere near the same team, as at least as bad of a team as we were when we earned that number 2 overall pick at the end of the regular season last year. So I feel like, hey man, my point is, and with as great as Jayden Daniels and Drake May, the talent that they have, depending on which one you prefer, I feel like either of those guys we end up with, Skip Bayless should be just as afraid. Now, moving on from that point, according to timeline rules, we will not be, like I mentioned earlier, the scary Super Bowl contender like the Texans are right now until year 2025, because we're a year behind them in the rebuild. They had the 2nd overall pick in 2023. We have the 2nd overall pick in 2024. So we're always a year behind them if we're literally following their plan. But there is real momentum behind the Commanders being the very next team to do what the Texans have done. I really agree with that. And so there's a lot of parallels here. We can cover that in another video where we truly break down what the Texans have done, not only these past 2 years, but it kind of goes back to 2022. Even the season that they had before they ended up with the number 2 overall pick, even though record-wise it wasn't great, they still did a lot of things in that offseason before that season, even though they didn't win a lot of games, that led to what they are right now. So I could do a deep dive into the parallels between those versions of the Texans and the current version of the Commanders in another video, and we're going to dive into moves we can make. We can dive into draft, we can dive into coaching staff hires, front office hires, all of that type of stuff. But for now, I just want to focus on, should the Washington Commanders trade for 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk, because that's something that the Texans just did, trading for Stephon Diggs to take them to the next level. Should the Commanders follow suit and do that? Now, again, technically, we are a year behind in terms of the Texans rebuild. So if they are doing a big trade for a receiver in 2024, that Texans wise, then the Commanders are supposed to do it technically in 2025. But if we wanted to expedite that rebuild process, the recalibration process that Dan Quinn calls it, first of all, let's take a step back and look at how historical this Texans offseason has been. Just first of all, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. The Texans are the first team in NFL history to acquire players coming off of seasons of 1,000 yard receiving, 1,000 yards rushing, and 10 plus sacks in one offseason. The receiving, of course, is Stephon Diggs today, rushing Joe Mixon a couple of weeks ago, and sacks Danielle Hunter a couple of weeks ago as well. So that's historical in itself. And then the Stephon Diggs trade specifically. All they gave away was a second round pick in 2025. And then they ended up getting, as in the Texans, wide receiver Stephon Diggs, one of the best receivers in the NFL, a Maryland guy. I mean, y'all know him, straight DMV and everything. And then they ended up getting Stephon Diggs and a 6th round pick in this draft and a 5th round pick in the 2025 draft in return. It wasn't even just Stephon Diggs for a 2nd round pick straight up, which I still feel like is a pretty good deal on the Texans side. But then they also got a 6th and a 5th in return as well. That's actually pretty insane. So technically, if that's the market for a top tier receiver right now, would Commanders fans like to give up one of our 2nd round picks for Brandon Aiyuk, a 5th and a 6th? Like, are we willing to do something like that? But with age and last year's production factored in, I feel like Aiyuk will cost significantly more than what Stephon Diggs did in the trade. I'm not going to lie. So even though Stephon is more expensive cap space wise right now as far as a cap hit, let's just say maybe we have to give up one of our 2nds and one of our 3rds for Brandon Aiyuk. Remember, we have 2 2nd round picks and 3 3rd round picks. Are you willing to give up a 2nd and a 3rd for Brandon Aiyuk? Because again, I highly doubt, just based on how his age and everything and his production last year, his Pro Football Focus grades alone, that he'll go for what Stephon Diggs went for. You're probably going to have to give up way more than what the Texans gave up to get Stephon Diggs. But either way, would you be willing to give up a 2nd and a 3rd for Brandon Aiyuk? And before you answer that, remember that you also have to pay him as well. First of all, you have to pay him $14 million that he's just owed because of his 4th year of his rookie contract. So that's just a complete $14 million cap hit as soon as you trade for him immediately this season. And then also we would have the option to pick up his 5th year option by May 2nd after the draft. And if we did, which we more than likely would end up doing, he would cost us $14.1 million worth of guaranteed money against the cap in 2025. And that would be a steal, first of all. To be able to go into the 2025 season paying Brandon Aiyuk $14.1 million is insane. That would make him the 22nd highest paid receiver in the NFL according to annual value. And again, that's a steal for a guy that's at worst a top 15 receiver in the NFL, and in some people's eyes a top 5 receiver, especially according to Pro Football Focus, which we'll get to soon. But that's super cheap. That's great value for a guy at his level. You won't have to worry about paying him big time receiver franchise money until 2026 technically. Even though I would prefer to go ahead and pay him as soon as possible so that we can save some money in the long run before he starts to go even crazier. But one scary part about all of this is that we will have to pay Terry McLaurin in the 2026 offseason as well, and Jahan Dotson in the following offseason in 2027 if we pick up his 5th year option. If they don't pick up his 5th year option, we would have to pay all 3 of them in the same exact 2026 offseason. And odds are we would end up not paying at least and keeping one of them, at least, probably even 2 of them, and only giving one of them big time money. You just never know. So that's an ugly situation when you look far into the future. But man, first of all, if your plan is to go Jayden Daniels, which it just seems like is the most likely scenario right now based on everything that I'm hearing and seeing around the internet, of course nobody knows, but just say for example Jayden Daniels is the pick 2nd overall. That would be a beautiful match made in heaven right there. I don't know if a lot of people remember or have even thought about this, but they have both said it over and over again. They are best friends from their times at Arizona State. The chemistry is like this for those guys, man. On and off the field, they super duper rock with each other. But most importantly, from the Commanders' point of view, as a fan base, their chemistry is crazy on the field already. Like if we were to trade for Brandon Aiyuk and end up drafting Jayden Daniels as our quarterback, Brandon Aiyuk will be the receiver that he has the most chemistry with by far out of everybody on his roster. Even though Terry McLaurin has been here with the burgundy and gold for several years, Jahan Dotson is going into his 3rd year. Jayden Daniels has never thrown a pass to those guys, but he's thrown a lot of passes to Brandon Aiyuk. So that would just already expedite Jayden Daniels' development because he would have at least one receiver that he already has chemistry and trust in just day one, just because we went ahead and traded for his ex-college teammate. And then also think about it from the aspect of, remember the Eagles traded for AJ Brown to reunite with Jalen Hurts from their time in college as well. And look at how well that worked out for them, outside of the attitude that sometimes the AJ Brown has. But that's worked out very well for Jalen Hurts. That helped take him to the next level. He had an MVP caliber season immediately after they traded for Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown. But then again, I don't know what happened last year. It seems like teams figured them out a little bit. I don't know. And then to go even deeper into the parallel, I would say that Jayden Daniels, coming out of college-wise, compared to college Jalen Hurts, I feel like Jayden Daniels is literally better than Jalen Hurts. With Jalen Hurts coming out of Oklahoma, Jayden Daniels coming out of LSU, Jayden Daniels is better than Jalen Hurts in every way possible other than weight, strength, and age. Everything else, Jalen Hurts is easily better than Jalen Hurts coming out of college, in my opinion. He's faster, more accurate, reads the field more, willing to throw over the middle of the field more, changes protections at the line of scrimmage, better deep ball, everything. And you see how Jalen Hurts worked out at the NFL level after they traded for his own ex-college teammate. If you do the same thing for Jayden Daniels, imagine what the sky's the limit for a guy like that. And I just feel like Adam Peters can end up pulling the same thing because, if anything, we have that deep connection going back to the 49ers. Adam Peters was there when the 49ers drafted Brandon Aiyuk a couple of years ago. And even just separate from Jayden Daniels, Brandon Aiyuk is just a straight-up dog. Like, no matter who our quarterback ends up being, even if it's Drake May or whoever, Aiyuk still makes, no matter who we draft second overall, a better quarterback. Let's take a look at Pro Football Focus grades. We're going to dive into stats immediately after this, but Pro Football Focus felt like he was the second best receiver out of the entire NFL last year with a 91.5 overall offensive grade. Only person ahead of him was Tyreek Hill with a 93.4. So they had him over Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Puka Nacua, AJ Brown himself, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice, Tank Dell, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Drake London. I mean, all of these elite receivers. We can keep going down and down and down. They have Terry McLaurin 35th. And again, they have Brandon Aiyuk second. And then if you filter it by just receiving grade specifically, they still have him as the second best receiver out of the entire NFL, only behind, again, Tyreek Hill. And then when you filter it by run blocking, because he's not just a great receiver, he also contributes as a run blocker. So he also improves your run game as well, which Jahan Dotson kind of struggles with a little bit just because of size. He has the tenacity. He loves to do it. He's very willing. But Brandon Aiyuk has the build to really, like, if you need somebody to wall off a cornerback to allow the running back to get to the outside, like a Brian Robinson or an Austin Eckler, he would be your guy there. I feel like Terry McLaurin can do it well as well, but I mean, Brandon Aiyuk, you could argue, is better at blocking than even a Terry McLaurin, because Brandon Aiyuk is ranked 5th out of all wide receivers according to Pro Football Focus in run blocking grade with a 72.9, only behind Puka Nacua, Jake Bobo, Jawan Jennings, and Nico Collins, ahead of every other receiver in the entire NFL. Terry McLaurin's way down there. I think he's like somewhere like 40-something, late 30-something. So, I mean, this guy comes in and, according to Pro Football Focus, is a better receiver than Terry McLaurin and a better blocker than Terry McLaurin. So it just seems like a no-brainer, to be completely honest. And then look at how efficient he was last year. Now, granted, he was on a way better team than Terry McLaurin and a lot of other receivers that he's ranked ahead of, according to Pro Football Focus. But at the same time, he was tied for 31st in receptions last year with 75, and yet he was 7th in yards. 31st in receptions, 7th in yards. That's incredible efficiency right there. He had 1,342 receiving yards, and he had 7 touchdowns, which was tied for 18th. And again, that's on 31st ranked 75 receptions. I just want to keep emphasizing that. He didn't even get the ball top 30 most in the NFL out of all receivers. He got it the 31 most and still would outproduce a lot of other guys. And he had 7 100-yard receiving games last year. To put it in perspective, Terry McLaurin, due more so to Eric Bieniemy, Sam Howell, and the offensive line, had only 1 100-yard receiving game last year. Again, this guy, Brandon Aiyuk, had 7. And I like Brock Purdy, but I don't think he's just this elite quarterback. I think when we draft Jayden Daniels or Drake May, either of those guys are going to end up being better than Brock Purdy, in my strong opinion there. So it's just like, if he can achieve that with Brock Purdy, imagine what he could do with a very talented, elite quarterback that gets drafted top 2 overall rather than Brock Purdy, who, I mean, he's outplayed his draft pick, of course, but he was still a 7th round pick for a reason coming out of the draft, whereas these guys, projection wise, are expected to be top 3 picks for a reason. And I just feel like they're gonna come in and ball out, and Brandon Aiyuk would only make them better, but they would also make Brandon Aiyuk better, because again, I like Brock Purdy, but I don't think he's just a top 10 quarterback, and I think Jayden Daniels and Drake May both have top 10, at worst top 15 quarterback potential there. So just imagine what Brandon Aiyuk could do with whoever we end up bringing in 2nd overall. And also, to add to all of that, he's the definition of dependable, because first of all, he averaged 79 yards receiving per game last year. That's super dependable. And then secondly, he's only missed 1 game in the last 3 seasons total. He's played in 49 out of 50 possible games since 2021. When you're talking floor, you can't get much better than Brandon Aiyuk. Like, you know immediately what you're getting at worst when it comes to him. But like we've already discussed with the stats and the Pro Football Focus grades, you're also getting a very high ceiling. I wouldn't be surprised if within like the next 2-3 years, he's looked at as one of the best receivers in the NFL, like a top 5, top 8 guy. Because he's also entering his prime. He's coming off of his best season in 2023. He made 2nd team All-Pro, and with his current trajectory right now in his career, I'm expecting him to get even better, if anything, not worse. He's been improving very slightly year to year, year after year, ever since Adam Peters and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took him in the 1st round a few years ago. And then he just made this significant jump in his most recent year, 2023. And again, I'm expecting him to only get better. I don't believe his best days are behind him at all. If anything, I feel like his best days are ahead of him. And I also don't feel like last year was just a fluke. Like, this was just the one great year he's had. Now, granted, he hasn't had a top 15, top 10, top 5 wide receiver year any other year until last year. But again, I don't think it was a fluke, man. I think he's just actually getting better and better and better. And Kyle Shanahan also learned how to utilize him a little bit better. Brock Purdy became a better quarterback. And also Kyle Shanahan just learned how to, okay, Brandon Aiyuk is good at these things. He's not good at these things. Let's only ask him to do these things. And I felt like Cliff Kingsbury would immediately just watch 49ers tape and be able to get that out of him immediately. But again, like I mentioned earlier, we are 1 year behind the Texans in this Texans go from 2nd overall pick to Super Bowl contender in 2 years plan. Like, if the Texans started like a football consultancy group and basically were like, this is how you go from 2nd overall pick to Super Bowl contender. If we're following that exact blueprint, we're still a year behind. So timeline wise, we're technically not supposed to trade for a guy like Brandon Aiyuk until next year if we're following it to a T. But Brandon Aiyuk seems pretty disgruntled. I mean, it was literally reported like a couple of days ago that the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk are very far apart on contract talks right now. So he sounds like a guy that wants to get paid right now. The 49ers sound like they don't want to pay him. And guess who's an NFL team right now with the 2nd most cap space in the NFL that can actually afford to give him the money that he wants right now? It's us. But remember, if you trade for him, you're going to more than likely have to give up more draft picks than what the Texans gave up for Stephon Diggs. And then you're also probably going to have to pay him pretty big money, because that's the whole problem right now. If he was okay with just playing on the contract that he currently has, then we wouldn't be having these discussions about Brandon Aiyuk leaving the 49ers, because he still, if they pick up his 5th-year option, still has 2 years left on his contract technically. So he clearly wants to leave to get paid. So just assume that if you trade for him, not only are you giving up draft picks, but then you're also paying him big money. He's going to eat up more cap space than what he's currently making right now with that $14 million this year and $14 million next year. But you never know. Maybe if he goes to the Commanders, maybe he's willing to give us not really like a discount, but maybe like a, you know what, I see what y'all are building here. I see the Super Bowl contender in y'all. But then again, it's kind of like if you didn't see it with the 49ers, who was just literally in the Super Bowl, I don't know who you will see it with. So just be prepared that if you trade for Brandon Aiyuk, quite a bit of draft capital and also a pretty big contract to come right with it. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure y'all stay tuned. Again, I'm keeping y'all updated on everything going on. Of course, let me know in the comment section how you feel about this whole Brandon Aiyuk situation, or how you just feel about the Commanders being compared to the Texans and what they've done the past couple of years by an outside national media analyst that is not a Commanders fan at all. And the fact that Skip Bayless has even said that he's a little bit of afraid of what the Commanders have going on. Let me know how you feel about that. And of course, let me know how you feel about the Brandon Aiyuk trade. Let me know what you feel like it would cost us to trade for him from the 49ers. Do you feel like the 49ers would give us somewhat of a discount because we have Adam Peters as our general manager, the guy that helped build their team? Remember, they kind of owe Adam Peters, man. That guy drafted George Kittle, Fred Warner, Talanoa Hufanga, and so many other great players for them. Great Dre Greenlaw, all of these 3rd round to 7th round guys that Adam Peters is specifically given credit for getting. They really owe us one, man. So they should probably give us a slight discount on the Brandon Aiyuk trade, but you never know. They probably never would. But either way, let me know how you feel about us potentially trading for him. How much do you think it would cost us in draft picks, and how much do you think it would cost us in a contract, a new contract? If we were to, extend him, go ahead and get rid of that whole rookie deal and pay him the big money that he wants. Let me know how you feel about all of that and if you're willing to do it. And of course, man, I appreciate y'all. Stay tuned. I'm out.